United Heavy, runway 26, clear for takeoff.
Clear for takeoff, runway 26, heavy, but United Heavy.
Welcome to the Aeropedia Podcast. I'm Ashwin.
And I'm Peter. And today's topic is air traffic control. We have the pleasure of having Richard Kennington with us. Richard knew he wanted to be an air traffic controller since he toured a tower at the age of 8. Along the way, he earned his pilot ratings and worked as a dispatcher for a flight school. He got into air traffic control school, where he took a job as assistant to the airport manager at a small regional airport. In 1999, Richard joined the FAA as a certified air traffic controller and currently works at Portland Tower in Portland, Oregon. In addition to working air traffic, he develops recurrent training courses for all controllers nationwide. Ashwin Tower, this is Aeropedia episode 11, requesting immediate takeoff.
Aeropedia episode 11 is cleared for takeoff.
All right, so Richard, well, thank you very much for joining us on this episode of the Aeropedia podcast. We're excited to have you and talk about air traffic control. So usually when we kick off our episodes, we like to give our guest an opportunity just to give a brief overview of your background and how you got into aviation. So maybe you can share with our listeners a bit about you.
Well, I appreciate the opportunity. First of all, as a habit of air traffic controllers, we tend to talk really, really fast. So I'm going to try and slow it down. I may need a reminder, full disclosure. So don't hesitate to say, hey, can you slow that down for us?
We can be the annoying pilot from time to time. No worries.
Happy to always talk ATC. Usually I have to invite somebody for a tour or something to get them to listen to me. So this is a great opportunity. I had this little dirt strip near my house where I was growing up, and there were two families that owned two Cessna 172s. And I used to love to watch them depart. And I knew that about 2 hours they'd be coming back. So I was always ready for them to land and watch that happen. I just thought it was the greatest thing ever. So when I was 8 years old, I got the opportunity to go on a tour of Salt Lake International Tower. A cousin of mine worked there, gave me a tour, and I really never looked back. I knew since 8 years old, that's what I wanted to do. I saw the men and women talking real fast and just the environment and everything. And I said, that's the only thing I want to do. And it's really good that it worked out, quite frankly, because I prepared for nothing else. I'd be a bum on the street right now because I didn't prepare. I am really shallow, gentlemen. I'll be first to tell you, I am a really shallow person. How shallow, you ask? I was not a good Boy Scout. And the reason being that as a Boy Scout, I just kept doing the aviation merit badges requirements over and over and over because they're the ones that interested me, right? Well, they only give you the merit badge once, and it's really hard to progress if you're only earning one merit badge. So I didn't progress very far. I was not very good as a Boy Scout. But, it all worked out. I went to, at the time that I got in, and it's changed throughout the course of history, and it's changing again. We'll talk about that as we get a little closer, a little further into the podcast of how you get in to being an air traffic controller. But at the time, it didn't matter. Everyone had to go through one of the college training and initiative schools or CTI schools. So that's what I did. And I passed the school, and I was hired directly into Portland Tower. And I love my job. How many people can say they love what they do? So I feel very fortunate. I should mention this. I have an identical twin brother. He's an identical twin, but he's a pilot. He went to the dark side.
Oh,
he did. I'm sorry, but he went to the dark side. He now is a pilot for FedEx, and but he gets around. He gets through airports. So very, very common for me to be running through an airport, and somebody will mistake me for him and say, "Hey, you jerk! You're gonna say hi or what?" Before he got on with FedEx, he was at SkyWest. Who flies with Delta, right? And I'm Diamond with Delta. So oftentimes I would climb on an airplane, and there would be a SkyWest crew or somebody who worked with him at SkyWest, and they say, gee, you're a jerk. What? You leave SkyWest and you think you're too good for us or something. And so it really got to the point where I really had to introduce myself to crews and whatnot to say, hey, listen, just so you know, So it's very awkward.
So within the air traffic control framework, could you explain the different facilities that exist?
Absolutely. Most people, when you say air traffic, the first thing people think about are the people on the ramp with the wands. Okay. Now, while those people are integral to the system, they are not air traffic controllers. And so maybe if somebody knows a little more than that, then they think what they see at the airport, which is the towers. Okay. Again, that's where I'm at. The towers, I get to look out the window. I never get tired of looking at airplanes. Whenever one of those F-15s does an afterburner climb to 15,000, you can't get tired of that, right? So that's where I work. But in addition to that, there's some other facilities. There's the terminal radar approach control. Those are the men and women at the radar scopes. They're working airspace approximately 10 miles out from an airport, out to anywhere from 40 to 60, depending on what kind of class of airspace you have, and generally up to 10 to 15,000, again, depending on the class of airspace, whether it be Class C or B. But these men and women have a really challenging job, and that is mixing the arrivals with the departures and any overflights. Okay. And so they don't have a lot of airspace, but there's a lot going on inside of it. N90, New York TRACON, SoCal, SCT. Some of these are just incredibly busy facilities because they're working the VFR, the IFR. If there's any military, anything that's going on in there, they're working it, and they just do amazing work. So above the towers, you have these TRACONs, or terminal radar approach controls. But again, they only work up to maybe 15,000 feet. So what's going on above that? Well, that's the part that a lot of people don't think about. And those are our air route traffic control centers, or we just call them centers affectionately. There's 21 in the continental United States. There's 25 overall, including Guam, Hawaii, SANRAP, Puerto Rico, that sort of thing. But they own all of the other airspace, which covers many states. So basically from about 15,000 feet up to 60,000 feet. And again, it can cover many states. So for example, directly above me right now, as I sit here in the Portland, Oregon area, directly above me is some men and women sitting in Auburn, Washington, up just south of Seattle. And they're working the airspace directly above me. So basically from the Canadian border, about 200 nautical miles off the coast, over to the eastern confines of Oregon and Washington, down to the Northern California border. So the airspace they work is quite large. Basically your overflights or whatnot are what these men and women work. Can get very complicated. Look at the eastern seaboard, Southern California area, Washington Center, Jacksonville Center, Miami, and of course, New York. Let's not forget them. They have narrow airspace and a ton of airplanes that are going through there. It's phenomenal, honestly, what these men and women do. There's one other ATC facility that we don't really think of as a facility, but they are an integral part of the system, and that is the command center. The command center is located in Virginia. There's just one of them, but they run the traffic nationwide. When I say they run the traffic, they're responsible for running the flow programs, initiating the flow programs that basically hold you on the ground at your departure point. So for example, San Francisco right now has a runway closure. One of their parallels is closed. That significantly reduces how much traffic they can handle. Well, it does us no good to get you all airborne, get you down there in the San Francisco area, and then put you all into the hold. You're burning gas, carbon emissions, passengers aren't happy. It's not a good system. So now what we do is we hold you at your departure point. Listen, you may not like it, but it's better you're sitting in the terminal with the option to go Cinnabon versus sitting at 15,000 feet just doing holes, right? It's also much safer. It takes some of that congestion away. So what the folks at the command center do is they, in the simplest of terms, they initiate these flow programs and kind of control them. We want to be as efficient as we can. We want to put as many airplanes into that airport as it can safely handle. So that's their job at the command center, and so they're an integral part of the system, but they don't often get a mention.
That's awesome. No, thanks for sharing all of that. When you describe the different facilities and the air traffic controllers that are in each of those, are there differences in the skill sets that you need for each of those facilities?
There are. There are. And it's hard to say per the different facility, this one makes a good en route versus terminal, et cetera. But let me just talk about what makes a good controller in general. What are some of the characteristics that we're looking for? And the first one I would say is you don't want people that are too bright. And you say, well, wait a second, come on, that's counterintuitive. Let me clarify. What I mean by that is we have a lot of people that are very academically smart. They're very book smart, okay? But they're also very, very analytical. Before they make a decision, they like to really process. They really like to explore the possible outcomes and the pros and the cons. You ain't got time for that, right? So people that tend to be over analytical do not do well in this industry. They may be brilliant people. A lot of them are, but they just don't do well because they're very uncomfortable with making split decisions. And so that's one of the things we look for. Another thing we look for is risk tolerance. Okay. And you say, well, I don't want air traffic controllers that are comfortable with risk. I want a non-risky air traffic controller. And the answer is no, you don't. No, you do not. All right. Because the goal of the air traffic system is safe, orderly, and efficient flow of air traffic. Listen, if nobody moves, nobody gets hurt. That's great. But that doesn't satisfy the efficiency portion of it, right? We need to be as efficient as possible. If my requirements are 3 miles on final, give me 3 miles. 5 miles, 6 mile holes, you just reduce my capacity by half. So that doesn't work. So one of the things that they test for in the biographical test before you get hired is one of the things they're trying to test for is your risk tolerance. We want people who are comfortable taking a certain amount of risk. Now that doesn't mean we throw caution to the wind, quite the opposite. But you do have to have a certain amount of risk tolerance. And then probably the third characteristic that I would say is confident. You need a confident air traffic controller. Nobody wants somebody who's not confident in what they're doing, et cetera, right? The challenge with that is, and this is true of myself, my colleagues, sorry, y'all, but this is, if you're going to be honest with yourself, this is true. We walk that fine line between confident and cocky. All right. Some of us believe in the old adage that Boeing didn't make enough airplanes to tube us. Bring it on. I can handle anything. Some of our people can. It's amazing. All right. But generally, what you really want is you need a team player because it is the ultimate team sport. So I need somebody who's very, very confident, who is not going to freeze or gets afraid of the traffic, et cetera. But I also need somebody that can work as a team. And so that's kind of that fine line that we try to work. So those are kind of generally 3 characteristics that we look for to make a good air traffic controller.
Wow, that's very insightful. And everything you've said, for most folks out there, it may really seem like, wow, that's a stressful job, right? So talk to us a little bit about, how stressful is your job and how has that stress evolved over your career?
So I'm cocky, right? I'm cocky and saying, it ain't stressful. It's not stressful. I can handle it. All right. However, then you start listening to controllers when the tensions start to ramp up, something starts to go south, piece of equipment goes down. I just lost my radar or a frequency, or my runway's been taken away for whatever reason. I have a disabled aircraft, or 2 aircraft get too close together. And then you start hearing the tone of their voice go up, their speech pattern go up, cursing goes through the roof, and this fingers point and the yelling goes back and forth and whatnot. And then you say, guess it wasn't as quite as stress-free as you thought it was, or as you claim it to be. It's there are a lot of moments of boredom, but just like a pilot, right? Pilots say piloting is 90% sheer boredom with 10% terror. Okay. Where you're at, Kennedy ground, listen, those poor people just never get a break, right? But they do a great job at it, right? So their stress level is going to be a lot higher than mine. At Portland, we have peaks and lulls. Chicago, it doesn't seem like they do. It's always a peak, right? So there's a certain amount of stress. However, if you're good at what you do, if you're confident, if you know your rules, and how things work, then your stress level goes way down, right? But it is still a stressful job. But I love it. All right. There's nothing else I would want to do. For me, stress would be being a kindergarten school teacher. Oh, I couldn't do it. I couldn't do it. That kind of stress for me does not work. I hope that answers your question. I think I went in a different direction than you probably thought I was going to, but I hope that answers your question.
No, but it does. Yeah, absolutely. And there's pros and cons, and different people will look at the stress levels differently as well, right? But at the end of the day, you're not taking your job home as well. So there's
So
that.
that's one of the benefits, right? And not only do I not take it home, when I'm not in the chair, when I'm not plugged in, when I'm on break, I'm not thinking about it. I'm taking a break, which is good because we talk about fatigue and listen, I'm not a bricklayer. I'm not a guy out there laying concrete in the hot sun. That's got to be a fatiguing job. But you know what? So is mine. It's just different. It's a mental fatigue. And it's a very, very real thing. So we have general guidelines. Our general guidelines are that you don't work more than 2 hours on position before you're given a 20-minute break. And if we start violating that, then we need to find out something's wrong, something we need to correct, because mental fatigue is a very real thing, and we take it very serious. So when I'm on break, and we even train our controllers on this, right? Use that time to do something relaxing, whether it be take a walk, play a game. Although I think we know most people now are just on social media. They're just on their phones. But back in the day when I first came in, used to play a board game or watch television or something like that. Whatever you find relaxing, we encourage you to do that, because we need that mental break. We need to get spooled up for the next one, because it is mentally fatiguing.
As long as that game of Parcheesi doesn't get you stressed out.
Well, so yeah, there may have been a chessboard or two overturned during a break. So yeah, you know what? We might want to rethink that. You know what? I'm on it. Let me go back to the drawing board on that one.
Excellent. So Richard, could you talk a little bit about, you become an air traffic controller, you go through schooling to do that. But once you're in the role, what is the training? How do you get trained in the facility? And then over a period of time, do you need refresher training to kind of keep your skills tip top? Or maybe explain a little bit about that.
So, like I said, when I came in, most of the training was done at approved schools. You couldn't just go into any school. They had to be approved schools. And once you got through their curriculum, you were hired directly into the facility. For numerous reasons, the FAA got away from that, and they went back to their academy in Oklahoma City. So now everybody goes through that academy. And depending on whether you're going to a tower versus a busy terminal, a busy TRACON or the center, the training could be anywhere from 1 month to 3 months. And assuming you pass, and we have a fairly decent washout rate in the academy. I think it's somewhere between 30 to 40% washout rate. If you make it through that, then you go to your facility. Depending on how busy and complex the facility is, the training could be anywhere from 1 to 3 years. Okay. Now, just like a pilot, and I have my pilot's certificate, And I remember the day that I got my pilot certificate, my examiner told me, he said, "Congratulations, this is your ticket to continue learning." And ideally, we want that in any safety industry, right? So we do some ongoing training. Biannually, we do a 4-hour instructor-led course, plus we have some online courses. Throughout your career, you better be learning. And that's just true with anybody, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So what, according to you, is the biggest challenge with being an air traffic controller?
You went there, my friend. How much more time do we have?
Oh, we
We're
can
gonna
go
be
on for hours.
okay.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Good. Here you go. You took this. You ripped this Band-Aid off. So here we go. What's unfortunate about it is the challenges that we face today are very similar to the challenges they faced in 1981, which of course in air traffic is a very significant date. That August 3rd, 1981 is when Reagan fired 70% of the workforce. They went on strike, and it's illegal to go on strike. And we can debate the merits of that another time. But they went on strike. He gave them 48 hours to get back to work. Most of them did not. And you say, why would you give up a career like that? What complaints or grievances could you possibly have that would make you do that? And for somebody to do that, they must have been pretty severe, and they were. And unfortunately, again, they resonate with us today. So number one, abysmal staffing. A lot of our facilities are critically staffed. And this is no secret. And we've been on Capitol Hill, working with Congress to properly fund the FAA to be able to put in the necessary staffing. We're falling behind on our staffing. Back in before the strike, there were people that would have minor surgeries just so they could get a couple days off in a row. We have facilities today that are working 10-hour days, 6-day work weeks. So obviously the burnout, the stress of that is going to manifest itself at some point. The human factors are what they are. You can deny it as long as you want, but eventually they will rear their ugly head. So staffing is something that we still continue to try to mitigate. We're kind of falling behind right now. Again, one of our choke points is the academy in Oklahoma City, the aforementioned academy. They can only put so many people through that thing. So just recently, there was an announcement that the enhanced CTI program will be coming back, and we're just at the beginning of that. They're going to be developing criteria that the schools must be able to accommodate to train air traffic controllers, so that then they can go straight into the facilities and bypass the choke point of the academy. And that's not the only choke point. There are others, but that's one of the big ones. And so if we're ever going to get ahead of the staffing issue, we're going to have to do something different than what we've been doing, or we're going to get the same results. Staffing, it's one of the big ones. And it's critically staffed. A lot of those delays, that I mentioned earlier, are from staffing. The air traffic controllers will never allow safety to be compromised, but something has to give. And in those situations, it's going to be the efficiency piece. We might just have to hold people on the ground if we don't have the staffing to safely work those flights. So we'll never allow safety to be compromised, but you might get delays because of it. And it is reality that there are some staffing delays. One of the other grievances that PATCO had is outdated equipment and technology. And we're there right now. An airplane, some of the safety features of an airplane is the redundancy systems. And Peter, you know better than anybody. You talk about avionics and navigation equipment and whatnot. You need a redundancy piece, right? Well, with a lot of our equipment in the FA, we've gone to a fix on fail model because of the stop and go funding of Congress. It's unfortunate, but I mean, how many shutdowns or potential shutdowns do we have every year before we get an appropriations passed? So the funding process, the staffing, all of those are still ongoing issues that we deal with today in the FAA.
No, that's really insightful. And I think a lot of listeners don't fully comprehend that, really, right? Or haven't heard of that. So it's good information. If the funding were to become consistent, do you foresee changes in the technology or the role of air traffic control going forward in the future? And what you vision being different in the future?
So, I mean, it's just a reality that money will always be an issue. You can't just print it. Money will always be an issue. So how do we, going forward, how do we continue to improve the system, but we're still responsible with the taxpayer dollars? There's a lot of things that have to be overhauled. For example, the NOTAM system, we saw the system only the second time since 9/11 that came to a screeching halt because the NOTAM system went down, right? So that needs to be revamped. I have equipment, there's equipment around the National Airspace System. It's my information display. So everyone has an information display, and depending on the facility, they get to customize it. What kind of information do I need to know? I need to know our runways closed, taxiways, airports, our satellite airports that I work airplanes into. Is that closed? What is my weather? What other general information do I need to know? And so we have these information displays. Well, the FAA has rolled out new displays, and then they'll get it into, I don't know, 30 facilities. Of the 300 plus facilities, they'll get it into a couple, and then the funding of that one will go away, and that one falls by the wayside, and we go to another one. So we have all these different systems that we're supporting for our information displays. We have equipment out there, and I'm not making this up. We have equipment out there that is run off of DOS programs. We have Windows XP programs that are out there, which, as we know, is no longer supported by Microsoft, right? So there's facilities out there that they have a little computer, and there's a sticky note that says, "Don't turn this off because we don't know if we can turn it back on." We have some very antiquated equipment, and so we need to streamline that process. And again, kind of goes back to the stop and go funding. But as we look forward, and I think this gets more to your question, Peter. Where do we see that? A lot of people say, well, AI is going to take over your job. Maybe one day, but not in my lifetime. Okay. I welcome the positives that artificial intelligence can bring. I don't know what those are right now. I'm sure there are some. And so I welcome investments, technology that can help us out. There's a number of things that we currently have. For example, our ASD system, which shows me in the tower on a display what my ground traffic looks like. One of the features of it is if the equipment detects two airplanes on a runway that shouldn't be at a certain speed, it'll give me an alert. So I welcome all of that sort of thing. I don't think AI, though, is going to replace the human anytime soon in my job. Some of the other equipment, excuse me, some of the other equipment that we see being developed around the world, being implemented around the world, is digital towers. So at airports, for example, in my neck of the wood, Bend, Oregon, Bend has a explosion of traffic. They're still much slower than Portland, for example, but they have an explosion of traffic. Well, who's going to build them a tower? The city might be able to do it. Are the feds going to do it? So there's a lot of fighting over who's going to build a tower. And if you do build a tower, who's going to staff it? Is it going to be a FAA? Is it going to be a contract? And that sort of thing. But one of the technologies of the future, and we still have to figure this out in the FAA. Okay, we're not doing this tomorrow. But in the very near future, I do believe that digital towers, where you have a pole in the middle of the airport that has very high quality HD cameras that can give you the controller a view that you would get from the tower from these cameras. Now, listen, I was skeptical myself about this first thing, and I do think that the first generations of these did not pan out. However, the Hungarians are using it currently. The Italians are using it. Even London. I believe it's well, I know for a fact Heathrow, for example, has a remote tower as a backup. And what happens is you've got these cameras, and that feed is fed into somebody working. It could be at a corporate park somewhere in a warehouse. Piped into there, and you've got controllers of consoles that are working rather than building these brand new towers, which are very expensive and also very expensive to upkeep. Now, again, there's a lot of work that needs to go into before we can do that. But I think that if you look at the future and monumental changes, I think that's probably going to be the most visible to the flyers.
Wow, that's very insightful. One last question before we wrap this section up. If for the young professionals out there, if someone wanted to become an air traffic controller today, what's the process? How do they apply? Where do they apply?
That's an excellent question. It's kind of funny because today, April 19th, the FAA has an open bid going on. These only happen maybe once, maybe twice a year, where anybody off the street, you don't have to have any aviation experience, can bid the job. Now they have some requirements: U.S. citizen, English languages, work experience, or college, not necessarily aviation related, but just a degree. And so they have this plethora of requirements that you have to meet. And then if you get through that and the FAA decides to hire you, then before they hire you, you have to pass a biographical questionnaire, a background check, drug and alcohol check, medical check. So there's all sorts of steps, but you don't need, it's great. Like maybe if you just worked at your current job for 3 years, you have 3 years work experience, you could bid this. And assuming that you can pass all those tests, you could be in Oklahoma City before too long, already hired into the agency. And that's kind of been their main way of hiring for the last little bit. Now, like I said, we are not keeping up with staffing. So another way to get in is through the veterans preference. If you go into the military, we give veterans a preference. They also have an age requirement that's different, and I'll talk about that in a second because that's kind of important. And then, like I said earlier, this Enhanced College Training Initiative program that is just coming back, and the FAA is just starting that now. They can't even tell you. I can't tell you when exactly that's going to be up, which schools is going to be a part of, but stay tuned for that because that'll be happening very rapidly. That'll be coming about. There are some schools, some of the legacy schools that were out there before. I'm sure they can ramp up pretty darn quick and be ready to go. So there's going to be kind of those three ways, either through the military, off the street hires, or through the schools. One of the requirements of an air traffic controller is you must be hired by your 31st birthday. Can't be hired after age 31. The reason being is there's a mandatory retirement age of 56. The FAA wants to at least get their 25 years out of you. So 31 plus 25, ergo you get 56. So there's that 31 piece. And
Ashwin, you look young enough. You can apply and see if they catch it.
Yeah, do it. Just fudge the paperwork. Nothing can go wrong with that. Now the veterans, there was a congressional change to that. veterans can now get in as late as age 35, if you were a controller in the military. So those are your ways to go about it.
Awesome. Sounds good. I hope some folks are listening and start applying, right?
I do too, because I need a break, man. I need a break.
So we're going to move on to the next section, which is a rapid fire round. Just, tell us the first couple of things that pop into your head. What's your fondest aviation memory?
Oh, good heavens. Oof. I don't know. I've worked the heavy Antonov 225. I worked Air Force One. I've worked my particular one of my particular favorite military aircraft, the A-10. I've just there have been so many opportunities. Perhaps it's this, and this is going to sound a little weird, but perhaps my favorite aviation memory is working some fire towers. When there's forest fires, for example, what'll happen is the Forest Service will go out and they'll take over a little tiny airport. But they need air traffic controllers there, because now not only do you have the regular traffic, but now you've got the Forest Service coming in with all their helicopters and their big tankers and everything, and it needs to be controlled. So what they will do is they will send you out to some little podunk airport, Joseph, Oregon, for example. Do you know where Joseph, Oregon is? No, nobody knows where Joseph, Oregon is. It's out in the middle of nowhere. But I was out there
Next to
because
Mary.
what's that?
Next to Mary, Oregon.
Okay, everybody but Peter would not know where that's at, right? Except they have a rodeo there. They have a rodeo. They're very famous for their rodeo, so you might know it for that reason. But so I was sent out there. The last one I did was actually kind of really cool. I was out in Coeur d'Alene, Idaho. But you're working in a trailer. It's a trailer with AC that doesn't work, radios that are kind of sketch at best, and you're propped up on this little mound of dirt to try and elevate you a little bit, and you work traffic that way. And it's complicated. There's very little procedures. You just have your standard rules, and you got people that may not even know you're there, and so they go bombing right through your airspace, land and you're like, I don't know who this is. They're not talking to me, but they just land on my runway, and I'll adjust. There's a degree of complexity there that's a lot of fun. That'd probably be my best memory.
Awesome. And one last question in this section is, what part of aviation do you feel is least understood or misunderstood by the general public, and what can they do to learn more?
Least understood. Well, just air traffic in general, right? Because like I started off by saying, if you say to the average person on the street, what's an air traffic controller? They're going to do they're the little people with the little wands, right? And so there's so much misunderstanding. But I think that's also why there's not as many people going into the professions, because they just never thought about it. So I know the FAA and the National Air Traffic Controllers Association has done a lot of outreach, some to inner city, they take advantage of fly-ins and air shows and that sort of thing to try and get that word out there, and a lot of STEM events. How do we get this information out there, let people know about the profession?
Nice. Okay. So we're going to move on to our next section. Peter, what is that section?
Oh, Richard, you're in for a treat. It is your Aeropedia Podcast trivia round.
Don't threaten me with a good time.
This is the opportunity every guest gets to test their knowledge in our pursuit of the ultimate trivia champion. So, you ready?
Yes.
All right. Your first question is an airplane spotting question. Can you identify the main visual difference between the Boeing 767-200 variant and the Boeing 767-300 variant?
I cannot, and I'll tell you why, because I don't care. I know that the standard separation that I need behind them is either 4, 5, or 6 miles, depending on the aircraft that's following. So it's a trick question. There is no difference when it comes to wake turbines. But in fairness, the question says visual difference. So
yes.
That I don't know, but I know you know, Peter. Educate me. What is it?
Well, fancy you should ask. So the 767-200 is on top and the 767-300 is on the bottom. Do you notice anything different? And for those listening in,
I mean, the 300 is obviously much longer. If you look at, for example, I mean, you can see right away with there's two doors over the wing on the 300 series. So I assume it's mostly just that they lengthen the fuselage.
length, but you pointed it out. But then if you notice on the top, the 200 only has a single over-wing exit. So that is
Peter, I'm going to go into work tomorrow, and I'm going to berate all of my controllers for not knowing this. I'm going to say, how can you not know that? I'm going to totally pretend that I knew this when I go in. But all right, cool. I like that. All right,
All right.
next. What's next one?
And this was a somewhat trick question because there are some configurations of the 300 that also have a door and a single, but we'll leave that for another episode. All right. Airports. This Florida airport was opened in 2010, replacing an old airport that could not support expanded service nor extend its runways to meet standard runway safety requirements. Can you name this Florida airport or city?
Opened in 2010.
I have a picture of said airport. It's very unique. They found a location that was far from civilization to keep it away from.
I don't know it because nobody flies in there.
Perhaps. It is Panama City, Florida. The Northwest Florida Beaches International Airport, even though it is not on a beach.
So as an air traffic controller, I immediately go to what is the three-letter identifier for that airport? I want to say, is it PCS?
I think it might be. Yes. I'll have to add that to the trivia round for another guest. It will be the Richard Kennington Memorial question.
Yes. Memorial, that implies something.
All right, your question 3, airlines. This cargo airline began operations with a fleet of Dassault Falcon 20 aircraft, such as the one depicted here.
I'm going to say Kalita.
It is a very good guess, but incorrect. It is actually Federal Express, FedEx. They started operations with a fleet of Dassault Falcon 20s, in fact, and you can go to the Smithsonian Udvar-Hazy Museum, and they have their first one there, actually.
Fascinating. I didn't know that.
Next question. Here's your codes. Can you name both IATA and ICAO codes? Charlie Victor is the IATA code, and Charlie Lima X-ray is the ICAO code for this airline.
I believe that would be Cargo Lux.
Ding, ding, ding. Success. In fact, it is Cargo Lux Airlines. Well done. They serve Portland from time to time, don't they?
On occasion, yep.
All right, regulations. This Freedom of the Air number refers to airlines that are allowed to carry passengers or cargo between two foreign countries as part of the service connecting their home country. So an example of this that's going on these days is Emirates actually can sell tickets to connect passengers from Milan, Italy to New York, even though neither of those cities is in their home country of the United Arab Emirates. So can you name the number, the Freedom number that this refers to?
Well, first of all, I'm familiar with this flight between Milan Malpensa and New York's JFK. So the problem is I know something of the question, just not the part that you're asking about. This Freedom of Air number, I don't know. I don't know this one.
Do you care to just throw a number out there and see if you get one right?
Freedom, I got one right. I got
the second one right. Sorry, I caught myself. I'm sorry.
Number refers to airlines allowed to.
So Richard, it's between 1 and 6. I'll give you a clue.
Oh, Freedom Air. Let's go with 6.
Close.
5. It is the 5th freedom of the skies.
That's interesting. I got to look that up. Then that begs the questions: what's 1, 2, 3, and 4? So I'm going to look those up.
There are different freedoms of the sky. So allowing for passengers within a country, between countries. All of those are the freedoms of the sky.
I don't know. Is this a good thing though? Is it is this a good thing for consumers and that sort of thing? trying to think about that. You know, what does this do to ITA, formerly, Alitalia,
Yeah.
to have that kind
Yeah.
of, but is it good for the consumer in that, does it keep prices in check and that sort of thing? I don't know.
There's
I'd
options,
have
yeah.
to research that some more.
Yep. But well, thank you for participating in the trivia round. You got one right. So that will take. And
I will, yeah, I'll take that. Yeah, but when I talk to my coworkers about this tomorrow, I'm going to have known every one of those. I'm
absolutely
for not knowing.
Well, thank you so much, Richard. This was really engaging and interesting, and I'm sure our listeners will think the same. So thank you so much for taking your time to participate.
Thanks a lot,
My
Richard.
pleasure, gentlemen. I appreciate the opportunity to talk about the profession I love. It's the only place where you get to tell people what to do, how fast they can do it, and they can't give you any lip.
Awesome. Thanks a lot, Richard. And we look forward to having you again in the future when our episode has resulted in many folks becoming air traffic controllers.
Perfect. Yes. And I'm not even going to take a percentage of their pay as a finder's fee. I won't even do that. But
Neither will we.
I will study for the next exam, though.
Awesome.
Yes, you should.
Yeah.
So,
Okay.
All right. Thanks, gentlemen.
Thanks for joining us this week. Send us any feedback, trivia ideas, or future topics you may have to our email at aeropedia.podcast@gmail.com. See you on the next leg of our journey.
Bye for now.
Remember to any heavy, contact departure 119.2. Good night.
119.2, speed at 290 heavy. Good night.